Cities Skylines II launched 2 days ago, and unfortunately it is yet another game not finished at launch. 3 weeks ago, Colossal Order announced that the game would be canceling its console release on October 24th and only releasing on PC. It also announced that the PC performance on most computers would not be able to withstand what the game demanded. At the moment, we are getting reports of 30 frames per second on the most powerful PCs. And with review headlines like these, you can see that Colossal Order has a lot of work to do before the game is actually in a state of play. Problems like these have plagued multiple new releases coming out in the past few years. And this is exactly why physical media is already dead. Okay, I knew that was going to be a hot take. Updates are not forever, and once the store shuts down, you won't be able to update the game. Unfinished games are ruining game collecting in the future for next generation. Day one patch has become so common that we just live with it. I own copies of Battleborn and Overwatch 1 that were bought in game lots, and they're pretty much useless. Recently, after finishing Red Dead Redemption 2, I wanted to go back and play Red Dead Redemption 1. I had sold my PS3, so I bought a bundle off of eBay, and all 20 games took all day to download the updates for. Red Dead Redemption looked terrible before I updated it. I started to play it and then realized I needed the updates, updated it, and it started to look like Red Dead Redemption again. But the biggest culprit of that day was Grand Theft Auto 5. GTA 5 took 4.5 hours to download all the updates. Once the servers for these games are gone, you won't be able to update them. 4.5 hours of missing content leads to games being released now that have things like double the size for the first update, the day one patch. Past 10 years, we have had nothing but releases of terribly broken games. No Man's Sky was so terrible, it's had something like 30 different DLCs to patch the problems. Fallout 76 was a terrible game. It's okay now, there's a large community, but it started terribly. Days Gone was completely broken. Grand Theft Auto Trilogy was completely broken. And I'm not leaving you out, Nintendo. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was absolute dog. The most recent culprit to commit this travesty are Arcane Studios. They released Redfall in May 2023. This is the same company that released Dishonored 1 and 2 and Death of the Outsider. And yet Redfall, another broken game. Companies feel comfortable releasing games unfinished because they're taking a page out of the biggest playbook hoodwink in the history of gaming. I'm talking about Cyberpunk 2077. This game was the hype machine of 2020. Released by CD Projekt Red on December 10th, 2020, it was all people could talk about. And it was removed from the store that very month, not to be put back on until June 2021. So 6 months after the game's release, they finally presented a playable version of the game. This game was so bad that they got sued by their investors in a class action lawsuit to the sum of $1.85 million. They also had to refund 30,000 different customers at an estimated cost of anywhere between $2 million and $51 million. The game itself cost $436 million to make, and in the first 3 weeks, it sold $563 million. Now, if you don't have your calculator with you, let me help. That is a total profit of $74 million. So why would any company ever release a finished product ever again? You can hit the ground running halfway through development and start making money immediately. Now, I know there are plenty of examples of retro games that were released broken, and unfortunately, because they didn't have downloadable content, they stayed broken. E.T. for the Atari 2600 comes to mind. A game so bad it was said to have caused the 1983 video game market crash. Now, this game was created by Howard Scott Warshaw, and he does not deserve the disrespect that he gets. He was only given 5 weeks to create a game. Why? Because they had to get it out before the Christmas deadline so they could make money. But instead, all they ended up getting was a landfill in the desert so that they could throw all of these games into it. Of course, someone came along many years later and pulled them out, because why not? As recently as 15 years ago, a bad video game would ruin your company. Homefront destroyed THQ. The game was released on March 14th of 2011. It had a 3-hour story campaign, and the company shut its doors on January 23rd, 2013. This is the same company that released Red Faction Guerrilla, Saints Row the Third. They had been making video games since 1989, and this game killed them. The same thing happened with Factor 5 and the release of their game, Lair. The game was released September 4th, 2007, and the company shut its doors in May 2009. And again, this was a very prestigious company. They had been tasked with several different Star Wars titles. They've been tasked with several different Indiana Jones titles. They had ports of the Contra Alien Wars, Contra 3. They had been in business since 1987, and yet this game shut them down. And let's not forget our honorable mention here, Haze, a game that destroyed Free Radical in 6 months. The game was released May 2008, and they shut their doors December 18th, 2008. This is a company that created Time Splitters, and yet, 1999 to 2009, you're done. Now, there are some examples of older games that changed just on the cartridge alone. One of the greatest games of all time, according to Metacritic, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. In the original release, there was a hover boot glitch where you could steal the fishing pole from the fishing hole. That was corrected in the 1.1 release. The 1.2 release changed Ganondorf's blood from red to green. The 1.2 release also changed the Fire Temple song. It had Arabic vocals, and they decided they didn't want that in the game. But the game was finished at release. It had a few things that they changed, but it was a complete game. However, one of the first games that was released unfinished was Sonic 3. Sonic 3 was running with a promotional deal, and they had to get the game out by a certain time. It launched February 3rd, 1994, and technically it was unfinished. Sega released the second half of the game, sold as Sonic & Knuckles, on October 18th, 1994. Although technically it wasn't a part 2, it was just an attachment that helped the first game. It added Knuckles to the second and third series of Sonic the Hedgehog. You could go back and play everything as Knuckles. It also added the Blue Sphere game to Sonic 1. But the main thing that it did was patch and fix a lot of bugs that were in the code for the first 3 games. So whenever you got your cartridge, you put the first, second, or third game on top of this cartridge. Arguably one of the first air quote DLCs for a video game. And I say that it's arguably one of the first air quote DLCs because if this game was released today, they wouldn't create another cartridge. They would simply make a DLC 6 months down the line. The first Cities Skylines game was technically a complete game. It was ready to go. It wasn't the greatest, but it was a complete game. It was released March 10th of 2015. Since its release, it has had 13 different DLCs, the first of which was only 6 months after its initial release. The After Dark DLC came out September 24th, 2015. 5 months after that, on February 20th, 2016, they released the Snowfall DLC. After that Snowfall DLC, they have released 11 more DLCs in the past 8 years that they've been making this game. I can't tell you exactly how much money I've spent on Cities Skylines. A lot of the packages that I bought were bundle deals that included a lot of different things, so it was a little bit of a discount. But if you go on Steam right now, you can get the complete collection with a 9% bonus discount on the bundle for $377.97. If you were to buy each one of the items, and that's all the creator content packs, that's all the DLCs, that's all the radio stations, everything that they've created on top of this game would be $415.41. I would say I've bought 13 DLCs. At $15 a piece, that's $195, plus the $30 that I initially spent on the base game. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop this video and wait for you to download the DLC so that we can finish the rest of the video. It's very simple. All you have to do is hit that like button and that subscribe button, and that will download the rest of this DLC. Now that you've completed that step, we can go ahead and wrap up this video. Unfinished games are destroying what will be retro games in the future. I would say the last consoles that you can actually collect for would be PS3 and Xbox 360 era stuff. And even then, as soon as you buy a vintage retro game, go ahead and throw that bad boy in there and get those updates on your console as soon as possible before they shut down the market and you're not allowed to do so anymore. Now, it's very easy for me to sit here on my very high horse and tell you to stop buying into the hype. Stop buying games at launch, especially stop pre-ordering games. Stop giving these companies your money until they prove that they actually have a product that's worth it. Let your favorite YouTuber play the game and prove that it's actually something worth it. Besides, they're going to re-release the game in 2 years with all the DLCs as a definitive edition. However, I will say, I definitely would have bought Cities Skylines II had it released on PS5 on October 24th.